Rain hammered the windshield of the black sedan as it idled outside the iron gates of a Gangnam estate, engine off, headlights dark. Inside, a man watched the mansion the way a wolf watches a wounded animal, patient, calculating, already certain of how this would end. He had waited 7 years for this moment, and he was not about to rush it now. 3 floors above him, inside that same mansion, Han Seokwoo gripped the armrests of his wheelchair and tried, for the 4th time that night, to lift himself onto the edge of his bed without help. His arms shook, his jaw clenched, and then, just like the first 3 times, he slipped, landing hard against the mattress, with a grunt that echoed through the quiet room. He used to run 3 shipping ports with a single phone call. Men twice his size flinched at the sound of his voice. Now he couldn't get himself into bed without help, and the shame of that fact sat heavier on his chest than the bullet ever had. The door opened. Odessa Marchand stood there, arms crossed, watching him with the kind of look that carried no pity, only patience worn thin by love. "You know," she said, stepping into the room, "for a man who once broke another man's kneecap for showing up late to a meeting, you have remarkably poor negotiation skills with your own legs." Seokwoo, sprawled half on the bed, glared up at her. "The legs," he said, "are not currently taking meetings." "Should I schedule one?" For a second, something in the room lifted. The old rhythm returned, that easy banter that had once made hardened gangsters uncomfortable at dinner parties, wondering how a man like Seokwoo had let a woman get so close, so unafraid, so unmoved by his reputation. Odessa crossed the room, hooked her arm under his, and lifted him the way she had 1,000 times before, because she had. He didn't thank her. He hadn't thanked her in months. Somewhere along the way, gratitude had started tasting like defeat. That's the surface. Underneath it, something colder was already moving. Before we go further, if stories like this move you, hit that subscribe button right now, because what happens next changes everything you think you know about this family, and you will not want to miss it. 3 floors below, in the office that used to be Seokwoo's war room, 2 of his most trusted men sat close together, voices low, the kind of conversation that starts with just business and ends with an empire quietly changing hands. "He can't even stand," one of them muttered. "How is he supposed to run anything?" Upstairs, unaware of the words being spoken about him, Seokwoo stared at his own reflection in the dark window, rain streaking the Seoul skyline into something unrecognizable. He was thinking the same thing they were, just with more shame and less ambition. He had built 3 ports from nothing. He had made grown men afraid of his shadow, and now he needed his wife's strength just to get into a shower chair. He watched Odessa move around the room, and he noticed things he used to be too proud to notice. Her smile in the mornings arrived half a second late now, like it needed a running start. She had stopped humming while she made his tea. Small things, terrible things, if you were paying attention. He was paying attention. That night, after the house went quiet and the rain outside finally slowed, Seokwoo lay awake beside her, listening to her breathe. He made the kind of decision men only make at 3 in the morning, the kind they can't take back by sunrise. "Odessa," he whispered. She stirred. 6 months of pride sat in his throat, telling him to swallow the words back down, to be the boss, not the burden. But something in him pushed through anyway, quieter than he meant it, cracking on the last word, like it cost him something no bullet ever had. "I'm still a man." Silence filled the room, the kind that has weight to it. Then Odessa turned to face him in the dark, and he heard it before he saw it, the small broken sound of her composure finally giving out. She didn't say, "I know." She didn't say, "Of course you are." She said nothing at all. She simply pulled him into her arms, like she was the one drowning, not him, and held on. Neither of them noticed the car still parked outside the gate, engine off, headlights dark, a man inside it watching the house with the patience of someone who had already decided the throne was about to become vacant. Word of Seokwoo's condition spread fast, and within a week, the vultures began circling, mistaking his honesty for weakness instead of what it actually was, a man finally telling the truth about what he'd lost. The first of them arrived on a Tuesday, wearing a suit that cost more than most people's cars. His name was Choi Young-tae, and 7 years earlier, Seokwoo had humiliated him in a shipping deal that ended with Young-tae publicly apologizing in front of men who never let him forget it. In this world, grudges don't expire. They compound like interest. Young-tae stood in the doorway of Seokwoo's study, uninvited, flanked by 2 men built like furniture. "You're looking," he said, letting the pause do the insulting for him, seated. Seokwoo didn't look up from the tablet in his lap, still charging by the syllable for your insults. "Inflation's rough this year. I heard you needed help standing," Young-tae said, smiling wider now. "I heard your wife does a lot of standing for you these days. Must be nice. A queen carrying a king who can't carry himself." The room went still. Seokwoo set the tablet down slowly, the kind of slow that used to precede violence, back when violence was still an option his body could keep up with. "You came all this way," he said, voice level, "to make a joke about my wife." "I came," Young-tae said, "to see if the throne was really empty." He turned to leave, then paused at the door, delivering the rest of his message with the ease of a man who had rehearsed it in the car. "Word is your organization's already fracturing. Word is your wife's tired. She won't be around much longer. A woman like that, brilliant, running her own empire, she didn't sign up to be a nurse." He left before Seokwoo could respond, which was, of course, the entire point. Odessa found her husband 40 minutes later, staring at nothing, jaw tight enough to crack stone. She had already watched the security footage twice, her hands curling into fists she didn't let him see. "He's wrong, you know," she said, settling into the chair across from him. "Which part?" "All of it. But mostly the part where he thinks insulting me will break you faster than losing your legs did. I've buried men like Young-tae before. I didn't need a gun. I just needed patience and receipts." Despite everything, Seokwoo almost smiled. But that night, alone in her office with the door locked, Odessa pulled up something she hadn't told her husband she'd requested 3 weeks earlier, his complete post-surgery medical file. Every page, every note, every timestamp from the night he nearly died, and instead simply stopped being able to walk. She had been looking for peace of mind, something to help her stop lying awake, wondering if anything more could have been done. Instead, at 11:47 that night, cross-referencing a medication log against a treatment timeline that didn't quite line up, Odessa Marchand went very, very still. Someone had changed his dosage in the first 72 hours after surgery, someone with hospital access, someone with a reason to make sure Han Seokwoo never stood up again. If this story has already pulled you in, drop a comment telling me who you think is behind this, because trust me, the answer is closer to home than you think, and it's about to break your heart. By morning, she had a list, not a long one. Only 6 people had clearance to Seokwoo's chart during those critical 72 hours. 2 surgeons, a nurse coordinator, and 3 members of Seokwoo's own inner circle, men who had eaten his food, sat at his table, sworn oaths that were supposed to mean something in a world where paper contracts meant nothing at all. One name stopped her cold. Ryu Jae-hoon, Seokwoo's second-in-command, the man who stood beside him at his wedding, the man who held his mother's hand at her funeral, the man who had a mug in their kitchen cabinet, a ridiculous gift Seokwoo had given him for his 40th birthday, a joke between 2 men who had survived wars together. Odessa stared at that name until the letters blurred, then closed the laptop. Because some fires you don't run toward with a bucket of water. You walk toward them slowly, quietly, making sure you understand exactly how big the blaze really is before you decide whether to put it out or let it burn the person who started it. She said nothing to Seokwoo, not yet. Instead, the next morning, she smiled at her husband over breakfast like nothing in the world had cracked open the night before, picked up her phone, and sent Ryu Jae-hoon a simple invitation to lunch. She had no idea that the moment he said yes, she would be sitting across from the man who may have stolen her husband's legs, smiling at him the way you smile at family, all while carrying proof that could burn their entire world to the ground. If you've made it this far, please hit that like button and subscribe, because what comes next is where everything changes, and you do not want to miss what Odessa finds out over that lunch table. Odessa arrived at the restaurant in Itaewon, looking like she hadn't spent half the night staring at a stranger's name on a hospital record. Ryu Jae-hoon greeted her the way he always did, warm eyes, an easy laugh, the kind of man who remembered your coffee order and asked about your week like he actually cared. He kissed her cheek, a habit he picked up somewhere years ago and never dropped, and Odessa let him, all the while thinking, "You held my husband's mother's hand at her funeral. What did it cost you to hold a syringe instead?" "You look tired," Jae-hoon said, settling into his seat, real concern written across his face. "Caregiving does that," she said lightly. "You'd know if you actually visited more than twice a month." "Ouch," he said, pressing a hand to his chest, mock wounded. "I've been buried in the northern port contracts. Somebody has to keep the ship steady while Seokwoo recovers." He said recovers the way you'd describe passing weather, temporary, unremarkable. "Is that what you'd call it?" Odessa asked. "Recovers?" Something flickered behind his eyes, so fast she almost missed it. So fast she would have missed it a year ago, before 6 months of caregiving taught her to read a room for every flicker of exhaustion or deceit. "What else would I call it?" he asked. "I don't know," she said, stirring sugar into tea she had no intention of drinking. "You tell me. You were there, weren't you? Those first 3 days at the hospital." The silence between them lasted only 2 seconds, but 2 seconds when you're watching for it can tell you everything. "I was there for all of it," Jae-hoon said finally, his voice perfectly even, perfectly practiced. Odessa smiled and changed the subject to the weather. Neither of them touched their food again. The thread arrived 4 days later, taped to the mansion gate, folded once, written in block letters someone had clearly tried too hard to disguise. "Step down or step out." Beneath the words, someone had drawn a small, crude wheelchair. The guard who found it made the mistake of showing it to Seokwoo directly instead of routing it through Odessa first, and for one brief, ugly moment, the house remembered exactly what its owner used to be capable of. His hand shook, not from fear, but from the sheer effort of not throwing the tablet across the room. "Who else has seen this?" he asked, voice quiet in the way that used to make grown men look for the nearest exit. "Just me, sir, and now you." "Burn it," Seokwoo said. Odessa found out anyway, because she always did. She sat across from him, listened without flinching, and filed the thread away next to a name she still hadn't told him. "This isn't about security," she said finally. "This is about someone wanting you to feel unsafe. A smart enemy doesn't threaten a man they intend to kill quietly. They threaten a man they want to watch fall apart in public first." 2 nights later, that public stage arrived at a charity gala at the Grand Hyatt, where half of Seoul's legitimate business world mingled with the half that only pretended to be. Youngtae showed up loud, late, and directly in Seokwoo's line of sight, raising a glass of champagne in a toast the entire ballroom understood was aimed like a blade. "To Han Seokwoo," he announced, voice rising over the string quartet, "the boss who needs a push, literally, to get anywhere these days. May his wife's strength hold out a little longer, for his sake." The laughter that followed was thin and nervous, the laughter of people unsure if they were allowed to enjoy the joke. Seokwoo felt every eye in the room swing toward him, waiting to see if the throne really was as empty as Youngtae insisted. Before he could respond, Odessa stood, smoothing her dress with the calm of a woman who had faced down worse than a drunk man with a grudge and a microphone. "Mr. Choi," she said, voice pleasant enough to cut glass, "where I come from, we have a saying for men like you. The ones who mock a lion's injury from a safe distance, because deep down, they know they'd never survive being close enough to smell his breath." She lifted her glass toward her husband. "To a man who has survived assassins, betrayal, and now, apparently, open bar comedy hour. Some men run empires. Others just run their mouths." The laughter turned sharp and sudden, swinging toward Youngtae instead, his face shifting from smug to scarlet in the span of 2 seconds. But as the room celebrated around her, Odessa caught something over his shoulder that made her blood freeze mid-toast. Ryu Jae-hoon, standing near the exit, watching Youngtae's humiliation with an expression that wasn't second-hand embarrassment. It was relief. That single word followed Odessa home that night. Relief was not the look of a loyal man enjoying his enemy's downfall. Relief was the look of a man who had been hoping someone else would do his dirty work for him. She didn't confront him yet. Instead, she sat down at her laptop with the focus of a woman who had run out of patience for being careful, and by 2 a.m, she found it. A payment routed through 3 accounts and a fake consulting invoice tied to a shell company with Jae-hoon's cousin, listed as a silent partner, paid directly to a nurse coordinator who had quietly left the hospital weeks after Seokwoo's surgery with a severance package she hadn't earned. If this story has kept you on the edge of your seat, now is the perfect time to hit subscribe and turn on notifications, because you are not ready for what happens when Odessa finally brings this proof into her own kitchen. It wasn't circumstantial anymore. It wasn't a hunch dressed up as suspicion. Someone had paid to keep her husband in that chair, and that someone had a face she had kissed hello 100 times, a name on their wedding guest list, a joke birthday gift, still sitting in their kitchen cabinet. 2 days later, Jae-hoon came to the house himself, first visit in weeks, sitting at the same kitchen island where he had sat 100 times before. Odessa poured coffee with hands that didn't shake, even though everything in her wanted them to. "You've been distant," Jae-hoon said to Seokwoo, warm and convincing, a performance so seamless she almost admired it the way you'd admire a forged signature. "Beautiful work, wrong purpose." "I'm sitting right here," Seokwoo said dryly. "You know what I mean," Jae-hoon pressed. "The organization needs someone who can lead by example. Isn't that the phrase you used at the board meeting last month, the one I wasn't invited to?" "You heard about that?" Jae-hoon asked, his cup pausing halfway to his lips. "I hear about everything in my own house," Seokwoo said. "Sitting down doesn't make me deaf." Odessa set the coffee pot down. "Jae-hoon," she said, "do you remember the mug?" She walked to the cabinet, opened it, and placed the small, grinning ceramic tiger on the island between them, like evidence at a trial. Because in a sense, it was. "He kept it because you were the only man in this business who never once made him feel like he had to watch his back. 15 years, Jae-hoon. He trusted you with his mother's life. He trusted you with mine." "I found the payment," she continued, not looking away from his face. "Shell company. Your cousin's name on the paperwork. Routed to a nurse coordinator who left the hospital with a severance she didn't earn. She's in Busan now. I have the dates. I have the dosage change in a file that should never have shown one. You were one of 6 people who had access." The kitchen went so still she could hear the refrigerator humming. Seokwoo's face had gone the color of old ash. "What is she talking about?" he asked, and Jae-hoon's face had already begun to break. Not into a confession, he was smarter than that, but into something close to grief. "You don't understand what he was becoming," Jae-hoon said, his voice low and, for the first time, real. Everyone was starting to whisper that the fear had a wheelchair now. "I didn't want you dead. I wanted you retired, safe, somewhere she could take care of you without a target on your back. I thought if you weren't a threat anymore, they'd let you live. You crippled me. Seokwoo said, each word landing like a slow, deliberate blow. To protect you, Jae-hoon said, because I couldn't watch you die the way I almost did. Get out of my house, Seokwoo said. Jae-hoon set the tiger mug down on the counter and walked out without another word. The moment the door closed, Odessa understood something with terrible clarity. No man confesses everything in one breath, especially a man still protecting whoever he made the deal with. Someone above Jae-hoon had made all of this possible, and that someone was still out there. 3 days later, Jae-hoon returned, not with an apology, but with a flash drive and the hollow look of a man who finally understood exactly what he had been used for. Young-tae financed it. He told them from the doorway he no longer had the right to walk through uninvited. Not to kill him, to own him. A crippled boss who owes his second-in-command everything is a boss Young-tae could quietly control through me once I inherited the organization out of guilt and gratitude. I was never going to be his equal. I was going to be his puppet. He set the flash drive on the table and left, and this time, no one asked him to. The reckoning happened not with guns, but in a boardroom full of Seoul's underworld elite, where Odessa stood beside her husband's wheelchair and laid out, with the same precision she had once used to save failing shipping contracts, the entire architecture of Young-tae's betrayal. The shell company, the payments, Jae-hoon's recorded testimony, the nurse coordinator's signed statement from Busan. She didn't raise her voice once. She didn't need to. You wanted to know if the throne was empty, she said, closing her laptop with a quiet click that landed like a gavel. It isn't. It was just waiting for you to prove exactly how small you really are. Within a month, Young-tae's own allies had abandoned him. His soldiers defected to men still loyal to Seokwoo. And the underworld that once feared Han Seokwoo's grip learned all over again that the throne had never needed his legs at all. That night, the rain over Seoul had finally stopped. The skyline was clear and glittering through the window for the first time in what felt like a season. Odessa knelt beside her husband's chair the way she had 100 times before. Except this time, neither of them felt the weight of what he couldn't do. They felt only the weight of everything they had survived to still be sitting there together. I'm still a man, Seokwoo said again, softer this time, no longer a plea. I know, Odessa said, out loud this time, the words she hadn't given him before, because now he didn't need to hear them to believe they were true. You were always still a man. You just needed someone to remind you what that word actually means. Not legs, not fear, not an empire built on other men's nightmares. Just this, someone who never once measured you by your ability to stand. If this story moved you even a little, that's exactly why this channel exists, to remind you that real strength isn't standing on your own. It's who chooses to kneel beside you when you can't. If you believe that, subscribe. Turn on your notifications so you never miss the next one, and tell me in the comments which part of this story hit you the hardest. Someone out there needs to hear it too.